Ladies and gentlemen of the crypto space, it's a Saturday. I was busy yesterday, but I wanted to get some content out to you today after what happened basically last week. Towards the end of the week, some very meaningful things happened in macro financials, as well as crypto financials, as well as the ongoing degenerate behavior of tokens that could be minted in seconds that have arguably significance from a meme and a cultural standpoint, which is always considerable. But what we do here on this stream is sustainability. We focus on sustainability and how do you engage with what is commonly labeled a market of pure degeneracy and gambling. And what we do is we put this entire space into the macro financial context from the perspective of a 40-year-old father who is interested in investing for purposes of sustaining myself, sustaining my family, and I share these ideas with you guys because I think it makes a difference. I think the strategy that we have talked about over the last years of this stream is going to make a difference in a lot of people's lives, including my own. Obviously, it's why I talk about it. The more and more I see the charts, which means the data that I look at, we are approaching very soon scenarios that are going to be very interesting. I'm going to pull up the charts and I'll show you exactly what I see. I'm sure other folks showed it already, but we're going to talk about it. I love Santiago, Brent Johnson's commentary, and I'm not going to digress. Maybe after I get my initial points across, but he hits great points. So 1 month bills, this kind of volatility, I'm sure has everyone in government, be it the Treasury or not government, the Federal Reserve, thinking, what the heck are we going to do? Now the system has already crashed. The banking system already collapsed. Let me explain. They intervened. That's where we are. The system has failed already. We are past the point of failure. It's like the reverse repo, and everyone says that the curves are inverted, but the reverse repo distorted that reality. Are they really reverted? The banks already crashed, so why isn't everything collapsing? Because they distorted that reality. So now we're trying to respond to a distorted state. Now, which means it's going to get more and more exacerbated. It's going to get wild. So how I find great comfort is that no matter the path, and these conditions indicate we're likely heading towards obviously volatile, but volatile is, does it go down first and then up, or does it go up first? History indicates that they are reactive, meaning they let it collapse first. In 2008, it collapsed first, but that was the banking system that collapsed in 2008, and banks have collapsed already, and they intervened over a weekend. They're getting to the point where I think they are going to be preemptive. And the best part of the methodology we talk about is that there's no difference in behavior required to reach the destination that we see. If it collapses first, who gives a shit? We're already in. And that, unfortunately, is a bit of a biased perspective. Almost everyone that listens to me and is already in. Positions, entries, that's hard. So, for newer persons listening to me, it may be an opportunity for entry if it does crash first. And that would be a wonderful thing. So I hope that it does have that capitulation moment first. People need it, but they need the information of what to allocate to. And that's the significance of the content we talk about on this stream, of where to allocate to that has systemic importance. Not the juvenile mentality, not the perspective of I want to turn $27 into $8 million with a Pepe coin. There's a systemic importance to these systems. There's a systemic importance to Bitcoin. There's a systemic importance to these Forex markets we talk about, to these systems that facilitate permissionless liquidity. There's not a systemic importance to necessarily the meme coins. They may result in them being used as collateral in the future, but who the hell wants to use such volatile assets as collateral? I mean, even Bitcoin and Ethereum are extremely volatile, so they're not the most collateral friendly assets. And we talk in terms of collateral because the system operates on the concept of liquidity. And there's less liquidity, the system contracts, there's less business activity, there's less financial activity, there's depression and emotional instability throughout the population. The system needs growth, which means more currency. That's how growth occurs. You're producing, there's employment, and that creates more credit to be more productive, which creates more employment. That's just the nature of what growth means. Now, whether we're overextended on liquidity and all that, whether the system is sound and not, just perverted to the point that they print whatever they want, Bitcoiners would argue that's the case. But I would argue the system is decent. The system works. There's perverted components to it, and they're unfortunate, but you can't fight the system. You could protest to a degree, and that is a significant offering of Bitcoin, but don't go all in on that narrative. I don't think that narrative is going to get you to the destination where you want to go. The multiples aren't there. And the function of the asset will not serve you in the long run. Savings. We've been talking about savings on Twitter commentary of mine lately. If you spend savings, it's gone. Now, Bitcoiners would say that the dollar denominated price of Bitcoin keeps going up, so you're spending cash liquidating for dollars and you always have more dollars because the price of Bitcoin keeps going up. It's not a sustainable cash management methodology because you could only liquidate Bitcoin periodically. There's about 18 months, give or take, of maximum price appreciation. And then you have significant depreciation. The cyclicality has been there. So sure, the argument from a Bitcoiner would be that at some point the volatility diminishes and it becomes stable. But then, but do you see my point? If fiat currency is continuously depreciating and Bitcoin becomes stable, now it loses its entire investment thesis. Because the whole reason to allocate capital to Bitcoin is it appreciates, not becomes stable, and you could use it as a currency. I don't think that is going to get you to where you want to go. And that comes from me trying to do the best for myself and my family. I just don't see it based on what I understand. I don't want to fight the system. I want to protest the system, but I'm not going to fight what I need on Friday and what I need in a month. And what I need a month is cash flow. So I think everything we've talked about over the last couple of years is the opportune investments. So don't get overwhelmed with all of the froth and insanity going on in the crypto markets. I think the core thesis is overwhelmingly more sound than ever. Look at this chart. Look at this volatility. We are heading towards the point of no return where either we're going to have a swath of banking infrastructure that completely fails, in which case we have these silly conversations of will the FDIC back everything? What happens to the Fed balance sheet? There it goes. And then you have just obvious correlation between the global central bank balance sheets and asset price inflation. And that's the destination. Or they let deflation occur, then you have social instability. I don't look at what's going on. The horrible headlines that we see today. I don't even need to mention them. Social instability is getting worse and worse. I don't think the society could handle a ferocious deflationary. I don't even think it could handle what occurred in 2008, yet alone earlier periods in the 1900s where we had a strong deflation. This is a total global currency, but if you go to USM2, we're in a deflationary currency regime right now. The amount of currency units is deflating. It's less. There is no inflation. There's no currency inflation. Consumer price inflation, but that has nothing to do with currency inflation right now. If there was a direct correlation between currency inflation and consumer prices changing, we would see consumer prices decreasing. There's not. It's knock-on effects. And this is what all the macro folks talk about with regard to the real economy versus the financial economy. Man, this chart looks horrible. I mean, this chart, this is the greatest currency deflation in the last 100 years. I mean, that's just food for thought. But we find ourselves in a position where China plus JPM2, I definitely did that wrong. That's why. Or maybe I didn't do it wrong. USM2, CNM2. Okay. So China has overwhelmingly juiced global M2 supply, which is why asset prices are so supported during a U.S. domestic deflationary state for currency supply. This is why we see such stability. It's quite remarkable. So the most important thing, and why I wanted to do this stream tonight, is to give you guys comfort, especially seeing what we saw with the 1 month bills this past week. It could get very bad. We could see a great deal of price depreciation. But for folks that own the assets, is that overwhelmingly meaningful? Is that overwhelmingly relevant? Can you liquidate your assets? If you can liquidate assets and you start to see prices significantly tumble, you're going to experience a lot of emotion. And me personally, I got to go to work. I got to take care of my family, and I don't want that emotion. So that is why I have crafted my portfolio as such, so I can train myself to divorce myself from that emotion. If I don't have a capacity to liquidate assets, I have trained myself to not be emotionally attached to the price change. Now, Bitcoiners would argue that you throw away the key or something, you bury your damn ledger. But I'm telling you, if you have a capacity to liquidate something, you're going to be emotional. And it's maybe the few that don't have a capacity to be emotional over it. But even worse, if you have a depreciating asset and you have a capacity to liquidate it, doesn't make you irrational to not liquidate it. So this is overwhelmingly why I don't subscribe to prevailing Bitcoin narratives. It doesn't make any sense to me. If you can liquidate something and the market is crashing, hopefully you liquidated it before it crashed. But if you've locked assets and you don't have a capacity to liquidate it, you couldn't liquidate it before the crash, during the crash, or after the crash. We've had a long time to train ourselves. I have, and this is what I've been suggesting, whether I've said it as clearly as I've said it tonight or not over the last year or two. I hopefully reinforce it well this evening. There's nothing to be emotional about. These assets that we've purchased, own, what's an expense. It's not a position. It's not a gamble. I bought something. It's like buying a car, buying a house, buying a business, buying a pizza shop. It's not stocks. It's not equities. It's not Pepe coin. This isn't the same thing. You're on a stream with a 40-year-old guy that says the crypto markets are probably the best destination for capital that I could see for an investment out of everything that I look at. It's not companies. There's too much of a risk profile. You're exposed to humans responsible for the management of those enterprises. You're exposed to their knock-on risk exposure to banking. If a company holds capital in a bank that goes under and they lose a certain amount of capital because they didn't make the best decisions possible, there's risk there. There's too much risk. There's too much damn risk putting your hard-earned money in the hands of other humans. I don't trust other humans. So when I say curve, and when I say, frankly, just immutable protocols, let's expand the scope a little bit beyond curve. And that's stuff like Liquidity. And that's stuff like Tapioca, which hasn't really gone to the full launch mode yet. But immutability, it's not even just curve, but this is the few. Is it not the few? Immutable contracts that are enterprise, productive enterprise. They provide a service. They offer you a capacity to purchase ownership. Not have a position in a stupid stock post-IPO where vested interest is able to use you as exit liquidity and dump on you. You purchased a position. Divorce yourself from the emotion. Sit back and enjoy the show. And these assets that are representative of enterprise will be productive the entire time. And guess what happens when you come out the other side? If there's a mass liquidation of banking assets, mass insolvency, US M2 craters, there's some sort of catastrophic event. Maybe Europe has a deflationary impulse. It's already been deflating from an M2 perspective. Japan and China are just juicing their systems left and right. But what comes out the other side? A desperate need for liquidity. Ultimately, to pay bills, whether you're a sovereign, whether you're the U.S. Treasury having to service the debt obligations, or you're any Treasury for any government around the world, or any corporate treasurer, or you're a person and needing to borrow money. The crypto markets are a destination for liquidity, accessible to any country, any person, but not of any country, any person. Isn't that remarkable? Isn't that comforting? You know, I see all this insanity. I posted earlier, I was talking to teenage cousins, and I just see such instability, and I see these horrible stories of the shootings, and I see such instability. And that's why I'm telling you this right now. Because I'm not unstable, exposed to this market, exposed to this reality of all this instability. Yet I've managed to find extraordinary comfort with this thesis, with this narrative. And it's not just comfort, it's excitement. Look, I'm excited right now. This is my excited face because all roads lead to crypto. And that's not hype. That's not Pepe. That's not Turbo. That's not memes. That's not any of that. Liquidity will be needed from the crypto markets, and everyone's going to figure out how to get it because these systems bypass underwriting, risk management, human resources, employees, real estate. They bypass everything, and that is so goddamn comforting. So whether the central banks basically in the United States or Europe, because obviously, as I said, Japan and China have already juiced their M2, and obviously they're going to keep doing it, when the U.S. finally figures out the debt ceiling and we finally start seeing M2 go up. What do you think happens when M2 starts going up? In this chart right here, what do you think happens when European M2 starts going up? Whether you see the boost in the real economy from an enterprise standpoint and corporate growth and whatnot, I don't give a shit. I'm tired of humans. I'm tired of corporations. What I care about is financial activity. I care about the financial activity that the crypto markets can facilitate that traditional markets have become a burden to facilitate. It's a burden to go to a bank to get a loan, to go through underwriting. I go to check out of the supermarket and I don't want to deal with a damn cashier. Show me a goddamn computer screen with a QR code and a scanner. And people still want to go to a bank to talk to underwriting and go through that bullshit process? No, permissionless credit changes everything. I mean, back in 2020, Mark Cuban saw that. Everyone has their own path and everything he said and everything he's done. It's all complicated, but the point is, he pointed that out very clearly. Permissionless. It's as simple as that. Don't overcomplicate things. That's what I talk about from an engineering perspective in my day job when I'm writing software. If it's complicated, stop and make it simple. This crypto space, literally just made everything about traditional financial credit simple. It stopped and made that shit simple. Need capital, post collateral, borrow capital, no underwriting, 5 seconds, thank you very much. This is the ultimate destination to receive transaction fees and to own enterprise. It just gets the human out of the equation. So on a Saturday night, as I got my family outside, I find myself being quite comfortable, knowing that some serious shit is likely coming. I find it interesting, disturbing, unfortunate. I feel bad. I feel bad for folks that are underwater on loans, that bought homes at way too expensive of a price, that bought cars at way too high of an interest rate or a mortgage at way too high of an interest rate, and they can't service their debt obligations. I feel bad. So the least I could do is share this story with folks to find a little bit of comfort in a world that's getting increasingly volatile and increasingly difficult to traverse. Why do you think so many people are piling into the meme coins? I mean, we've seen it in 16, 17. We saw it in 20 and all the insane degeneracy. It's only going to get worse. So if you're older, you don't have to engage in that stuff. But we've talked about how to engage in stuff like that. Yeah, you take 0.1% of your portfolio, 1.1% to 1% changes everything, 1% to 10% changes everything, those type of arguments. But in times like these, that kind of activity requires such attention. It really does. There's no free lunch. One person gets 27 to 8 mil. The few capitalize. Because if the majority capitalized, you wouldn't have all the lovely stories of I lost everything. The majority lose everything. That's just the way it is. So you see that activity and you're like, these fucking kids. So why not treat this shit seriously? Why not treat this shit like it actually means something in the world? It's important. It's important for not just you and I because of the opportunity it presents. It's important for the world because it gets the people out of business, and people are a problem. Yeah, me. I mean, I'm a problem. If I have to make a decision for a company, I would. That's a problem. So that's kind of the world we're heading into, where you got to get people out of the business equation, and people can build systems that are automated and permissionless and deterministic, so they're predictable. So the whole role of people in the equation, that's what's dramatically changing, and it's changing quick. So our responsibility as grown-ass adults is to understand the way the world is changing and position ourselves a little bit ahead of that change so we could capture that change and be on the right side of the equation. Just like I've said, stuff like the right side of rent. It's all about just positioning yourself in the favorable way. And we could do that, and we have done that. So, there's not much activity to do in this market. And if you're choosing to do stuff like compound, great. You're at the end of the week when you claim your capital, mentally think of that as dollars income. And if you're compounding at the end of that week, you are choosing to spend money to buy more of a company. Think in terms of that. Expect your income to be volatile. It will go up and down. And don't feel like you need to compound. You don't. Get that emotion, fix that emotion. You want more money. Hopefully you don't need more, but you want more. Hopefully this is a process of growth and investing in the future, and there's reasonable time horizons in play. Like when I think of time horizons and the destination for my portfolio, the beautiful thing is the principle's irrelevant. Those were purchases. So I think in terms of income. If the income goes down, I could buy less. I could get a flank steak instead of a ribeye. I may have to not go on a vacation. I may have to off lease only and get rid of my a finance car or a lease car and get a cheaper car. Oh, the horror! I have to get a cheaper car. If it gets really bad, I have to get a used car. Oh, let me take it to extreme. It gets really bad. All right, I sell the house at a depreciated price, and hopefully it's not underwater, and I move in with my mother-in-law. You do what it takes to survive. You let tough times pass, and you position yourself as best possible for the future. And this is the market to do it in. It's not going to be in the equity space. There's going to be none of this enterprise ownership cash flow opportunity in the equity space, because none of it in the equity space instantaneously targets a global landscape. The TAM, the total addressable market of crypto, is 100% of the human population. No company could ever come close to that. The regulatory bodies and the legal jurisdictions. This is the best opportunity in all of investing. Anyway, that was a lot of ranting. I hope that was a decent story. Let me hit some commentary and we'll flip through some technicals maybe. Dan, this is different. Evening on a Saturday, May 6th. I didn't get content out yesterday. I mean, come on. Curve USD launched. And everything we just said, the entire stream, is that not possibly one of the most significant liquidity credit systems you could imagine? So Frax is wonderful, and the breadth and scope of what they're doing is probably the biggest protocol in the entire crypto space. It's the biggest vision. It's like digital central banking. But the risk profile is not that of a completely immutable on launch series of contracts. That should be the case with Tapioca. So that's interesting. But, Bitcoin is what it is because of when it was launched, and that builds liveliness from that point in time, and it grows from there. So you can have the greatest protocol that's incredibly better than Curve launched in a year, 5 years. New tech does not disrupt the status quo necessarily. You can have the greatest tech in the world, and it's not necessarily a great investment. We see that time and time again throughout history. We've discussed that in length. This might be the this might be the best investment I could possibly see on the planet right now. But it's not an investment. It's a purchase. You buy it, you don't get your money back. Now, I know folks could do the liquid derivative pass, but guess what? If you have a capacity to liquidate it, you're going to be emotionally compelled to think about it at 11:30 at night before you go to bed. Is the market going to depreciate? Maybe I should sell if it's liquid. And if it's liquid and you have a capacity to sell before the market depreciates, it may be irrational not to liquidate. So just remember before you allocate capital to make a purchase, and before you do that, there's work required. If you have liquid assets, it can't be irrational, which means if you could sell something and you see it in the technicals, technicals like this, that the market may experience a capitulation event, it may be irrational not to sell it. And to me, that's a burden. And I don't want that burden. I want to go out and play the Switch with the girls. So I don't want to have to think about shit like that on a Saturday night at 9 p.m. And I don't have to because of what I chose. And that's meaningful to me. Angelo, Brian, weekend vibes. Nice to see you. Everything's fine. Everything's good. Was in the pool today. Nice and relaxing Saturday with the fam. Hi, Noah. What do you think of Pendle? Off my radar. Killis, good evening. Critical Mass. Matthew, yo, thanks for the stream. Thoughts on Lightning Network. So, Bitcoin changes everything. Immutable monetary policy. There's a risk profile associated with it because any sovereign can throw $1 billion at hardware and consume the network, attack the network, do whatever the hell they want. So it's still attackable. But it's the first to show that if you get humans out of the equation with regard to currency issuance, there's no more demon, there's no more scapegoat, and that's big. So that's meaningful. Greatest tech isn't necessarily the greatest investment. Obviously, back in 2010, it was an incredible investment. The equation's different now. You throw $100, you still have to manage it from a balance sheet perspective. If that $100 turns into $10,000 and the market's about to tank 50%, it's irrational not to sell it. So that's a burden for me. I don't like volatile positions, volatile and liquid positions. So Bitcoin's still a problem for me in the narrative that I just hopefully explained in a decent way for this stream. So Lightning Network's a big deal with regard to payments. I would love a capacity to make payments in a Bitcoin type of product, hopefully dollar stabilized, There's many protocols trying stuff like that, stable sats, over an instantaneous payment network like Lightning Network. None of these products are available. So what products have become available in the last couple of years to make payment at the grocery store so you can pay for food, or pay your insurance, or pay your car bill, or pay your mortgage? Debit cards that you can reload with crypto, which you get given every week because of the productive enterprises that we own. So the day that StableStats goes online and I could hold my capital in a dollar stabilized Bitcoin derivative, very nice. I like that. I like that a lot. And I would very much think that that's meaningful, but that doesn't exist. So until then, it doesn't mean much, unfortunately. It is what it is. One day, maybe. Um, 3 to 5% of Bitcoin by running a node, fixed income on a bearer asset. 3 to 5% from an enterprise standpoint doesn't get you very far. So running a node is interesting. It's always interesting to have to offer, contribute to a network like Lightning. Uh, okay, if you got 5 mil, 10 mil, 5%, okay, 10 mil at 5%, half a mil. Okay, that's nice. 5 mil at 5%, a quarter mil a year, it's pretty good. So, 5 mil worth of Bitcoin, you probably want to allocate 2 to 5% of the portfolio. That means you run around with a 100 mil bank account. I don't think anyone with a 100 mil bank account is listening to my stream. Um, so, you could scale that down, obviously, if you have enough capital where 2 to 5% of your portfolio allows you at 3 to 5% with a Lightning node allows you to generate $500 a week. See, now that's the equation. The point is that is the equation that you need to run to see if it's a viable thing to own, if it's productive enough. And there goes the position size argument, which I've talked about over the years. If you don't have enough capital to get a appropriate position size where it's productive and functional, you have to invalidate it as something to do. You can't own enough Bitcoin to put in a Lightning Network node for it to be productive. It may not be meaningful. And it needs to be meaningful. What's the qualification of meaningful? Where it produces enough money for you to actually pay your bills. Otherwise, now you have to consider opportunity cost, because there are other systems that are just as significant structurally from the global financial, in the context of the global financial system, the way it works, that may be more productive. So sure, Matthew, you're right. And I would like that equation. If I had 100 mil and I could have 5 mil of Bitcoin, 3 to 5% sounds very nice. That is not the case for me. DeFi advisors in the house. Much a pleasure. It's an okay stream. I get out good ideas and I try and tell the best possible story I can. It's not always coherent, but I think we've made some good points over the years. Bill, hi, Captain. Love the Saturday night stream. Wasn't expecting it. No, I wasn't either. DeFi, was Curve and Curve USD already discussed on this one? I discussed it a little bit. I never like to talk about where to allocate capital nowadays. It needs to be everyone's organic realization. And I mean, look what we have up on the screen. And I did basically say I think this is the best investment on the planet right now. And I've elaborated why. I just can't underscore immutable contracts enough. It means they will exist no matter what, as long as the network exists. And it's a global network. So what's the risk exposure compared to a company that has their capital stored in a bank account? They're exposed to the bank. There's risk profile there. There's risk profiles everywhere. Assess the risk profile before engaging. And that's why it's so hard to engage with stuff like Pepe Coin, because the risk profile analysis on something like that is the peers, is the vested interest. And when you're getting involved with those types of assets, those peers are predators, and they're there to capitalize. So it is not simple. From and arguably a lot of intelligent folks would say you have to not be smart to uh, uh, engage with those types of systems, because I'm too smart for my own good for those types of systems. I think too much. I'm trying to analyze and quantify and assess risk instead of gamble. But I'm 40 years old and I got a family, so I'm not a fucking gambler. I'm a quantifier. I make calculations. I do things based on due diligence. So that's why I think this is one of the most significant offerings from a financial product in 70 years. Permissionless Eurodollars. Come on, that changes everything. Frax Finance does that, but it's not immutable. It has an attack surface that's not comparable to what CRV USD likely will be. And Tapioca will offer this as well to a degree. And it will be immutable on launch, but it doesn't have the lendiness of this. And that is something to consider. So how do you address that type of equation? Position size. Simple? Did that simplify some complexity? If something has less lendiness, adjust the position size. If something has an increased attack surface, position size. If something has an increased risk profile, oh man, that's the problem, position size. But sometimes the risk profile is so much that it completely invalidates even considering a position. So that's the extent of the statements I could really make with regard to CRVUSD. What more can be said? I think it changes everything. And it gives me great comfort to what it will offer myself and my family in the coming years. Whether the system collapses first and we have an M2 that drops 10% and everyone's running around like chickens without heads, or they juice the liquidity beforehand and the Fed balance sheet rips up $1 trillion or $2 trillion, the destination is the same. I don't have a capacity to liquidate, therefore, when I get out of the stream and I go with the family at 9:30, I don't have to think about selling positions because I can't. And I've trained myself that if I can't sell something, I have no emotional attachment to it. It becomes irrelevant. It's a non-consideration. And I sleep well because of that reality, because of that choice, because of how I've trained myself to engage with some of the most fucking insane markets on the planet that I happen to think have some of the most significant technological offerings from a financial perspective on the planet that kids come to for degenerate gambling and absolute complete irrational behavior and hype, memes, oh, to the moon, oh. Ay, 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 ay. What do you, don't ever think I don't want to make 10,000%. I love to. I don't want the emotions. I don't want it. I am too old for that shit. I don't have any more time or patience for to the moon. I just don't. I don't have it in me. All I want is a reasonable income at the end of the week by an enterprise not run by humans, run by software that cannot be changed, is immutable, and I click a button and I get paid and I could go to the supermarket and buy food. And guess what? As the food prices continue to go up in the next decade or 20 years, how much more liquidity do you think will be in the system in 10 and 20 years? How much more credit will be needed to finance that liquidity? How much more credit will be needed to service global debt obligations? And where is everyone going to go to? Anyone with significant, structural significance. Where are they going to go to? They're going to go to the banks that have a risk profile because they got collateral on the books that's underwater? What was it? The 50% of U.S. banks have or a significant percent of the banks are 50% impaired at this point because they were, over the years with policy, told to own government securities that have depreciated because of the rising rates. What a risk profile. Therefore, crypto is such an incredible offering in a global financial landscape like that. And the equation is going to be very interesting with CRV-USD when you have a capacity to post dollar liabilities to borrow dollars. So you're able to. So in traditional finance, you cannot necessarily use currency as collateral. That's why they talk about government securities in terms of collateral, a collateral shortage. They're talking about government bonds. They're not talking about $100 million in a bank account used as collateral. They're talking about $100 million worth of U.S. 10-year bill, 10-year treasuries used as collateral. So, but on Curve, it's $100 million worth of USDC and USDT and three pool or whatever pools emerge in the next decade. Decade! I'm talking about Curve in terms of next 5, 10, 15 years. You can imagine what kind of LPs and combinations and stable coins issued by corporations around the world, issued by sovereigns around the world. What RWAs, real world assets, make their way into LP positions. That would be more akin to collateral. Albeit, doesn't an LP position, that's a derivative of a liability, and stablecoins are kind of a liability of a liability. So it's a derivative of a liability used as collateral to create additional liabilities. But that's the way financials work. That's the way currency is created. And it's not a solution sound money. So a Bitcoiner would say, oh, that's bullshit. Liabilities and derivatives. The problem isn't the liabilities and the derivatives. The problem is the humans and the subjectivity to create the liabilities and the derivatives. The solution to it is determinism, rules that are fixed, unchangeable. They will behave as expected in a predictable fashion. That is what changes the equation, not sound money. As base money, great, the Bitcoin narrative stands, but Bitcoin does not fix credit at all. Anyway, that's the deal. Raul, the way TradFi can dump their stocks and shares can also be done by Mike Ligorov and the Curve team when the vested Curve unlocks. Yes, it can. There's your risk profile. So I sure as hell hope folks have not allocated all their capital with that risk consideration. You need to have you need to prepare for all possible scenarios to protect yourself. And this is exactly why we talk about position size. This is exactly why we do talk about Bitcoin. It's significant. And why not have 1, 2, 3% of the portfolio allocated? And why not have gold coins? And why not have silver coins? And why not have cash in a bank account? And why not try and own a business, own a dry cleaners, or why not do things like that? You need to be considerate of risk everywhere, which means if you take it to an extent, you have in the back room a closet full of MREs, meals ready to eat. And it also means we're prepared for the zombie apocalypse. So you could take risk management to an extreme. And this is why I talk about you do what it takes to sleep well at night. And there's going to be a limit. There should be a limit to, the risk management of your own personal capital to the point where it's like, all right, fine. I'm not necessarily going to prepare for zombies. I'm just not going to. And I'm not prepared for nuclear war. I don't have a bomb shelter with 5 years worth of food because I can't go up to the surface because there's radiation everywhere. So there is limits to risk management. So that's part of the equation, Raul. And that's very nicely pointed out. So, but bear in mind that's risk to the price of CRV, but that's not risk to the protocol. That's not risk to immutable contracts. That is the other side of the argument that you make from a risk management standpoint. Very interesting. Late time. Last time I checked Checky Doc. My man, that's a good point. Don, what do you think of Pendle? Not on my radar. DeFi Advisor, Frax is bigger vision than Curve. Any mind share? Absolutely. Frax is the biggest attempt to push forward on so many fronts in all of the crypto markets by far. But it has a much larger attack surface, and it does not have completely immutable contracts. So it doesn't. It has an increased risk profile. I think that is the simplest way I could just answer that question. Good one though. Soon, good evening, a pleasure. Dan, I understand your take on Bitcoin. What do you think about Ethereum? So Ethereum has arguments like what Chris Black talks about. Um, Centralization risks, uh, albeit upgrading the network is still based on consensus. But look at the consensus. Who's running the stake derivatives? Uh, Lido, Rocket Pool, and then there's attack surfaces with their multi-sigs and stuff like that. So those are considerable, but that doesn't invalidate the potential or the significance of permissionless credit systems and deterministic contracts. So, how do you manage that risk? You have parts of your portfolio outside of the crypto markets. So, that's significant. That's a good point. Um, and I do think about that, but there's nothing you could do about it except position size accordingly. That's how we reduce the answer to that question as simple as possible. Soon, I'm having a great weekend. I had to be rational about a position. I ripped another 1393, but when I thought about it in this state, why would I gamble with my family's money? Listen, if you could turn $1,000 into $13,900, that's nice. If you were irrational enough to hold it where that $1,000 turned into like $2 million, you made $2 million, but basically anyone that continues to hold an asset with that kind of appreciation must accept its irrational behavior. So anyone that makes an absolute fortune on Pepe and Turbo and other meme coins, it's irrational behavior to hold an asset that has appreciated that much. Now, you get props for capitalizing. Now, obviously, that person who just made a couple of mil should probably start at the beginning of my streams, all 800 of them, a couple of years back, to see this journey about capital management and everything we talk about. Because the capacity to lose money is almost as easy. It's much easier to lose money than it is to make money. It might be easy to make that money just by buying a meme coin, um, but it's not so easy to be irrational. That's why everyone sells. That's why most don't make those kinds of gains, 20,000, 200,000%. They don't make those irrational gains because it goes counter to everything we are as a human from an emotional standpoint. So you made some gains. Gains are gains. It's lovely. That's a nice week. Thank you for getting me out of that Degen BS and making great rational choices. It's quite reasonable. And from a technical perspective, this is why there's targets. And you make calculated decisions. So being rational, the whole point is to find comfort, to have peace of mind, to be able to sleep at night. You think that guy who's up 20,000%, who turned $1,000 into whatever, or $1,000 into $2 million, do you think he's sleeping well at night? He's probably sitting in front of the computer, all frantic. What's going on in this Discord? What's going on Twitter socials? What do I do? It's frantic. I want no part in that frantic. I want calculated. And that is what we do here. Mind over body, any updated opinions on Radiant? Not on my radar. Uh, immutable stuff is what's on my radar. And stuff that has grand scale and scope. And basically, I can tell you right now that if we go over to here, almost everything on NEL2 is just invalidated in my scale and scope. Um, I mean, bottom line is probably one of the more interesting ones is Velodrome, and it's in a $638 million network, $636 million network. That invalidates it completely for me. I look for reasons to invalidate doing something. I have more reasons to not do something than to do something. I need to find a shitload of reasons to do something. So when I see a $638 million network, 636, I'm like, no, I'm done. And Arbitrum 1.94, done. Why? Because you go over to Ethereum mainnet and you are still close to $70 billion. Look at the liquidity, still going down. Negative sum game. But Ethereum is still 34 and change, almost 35 times the size of Arbitrum. It's over 70 times the size of Optimism. Capital flows to outperformance. Capital flows to where capital is. And sure, you can make your outsized returns if something occurs where capital decides to flow to the small market. Capital flows from Ethereum to Optimism. You're going to have some serious percent moves on basically everything. You get $5 billion that flows over to Optimism. Everything's going to run countless multiples. But that's not what I want to bet on. I don't want 1,000x. I don't want 50x. I want rational numbers. I want calculations. Great counterpoints you make. Glad to receive some alternative views. Best way to stay rounded is to sand down the edges. Thank you for the streams. Best of luck. Good stuff, Matthew. Yeah, there's plenty of arguments against the things that I say, but most important is just digest everything from a rational perspective. And it's arguable to say sometimes irrational things can be interesting. Can it be? Of course, the meme coins are interesting. You can make a shitload of money. But they're not rational. You're engaging with an entire community of vested interest that is entirely irrational. PvP, GameStop, AMC. I don't want any of that. I don't need any of that. I don't need any of that. When you get 100 mil, I'm still watching your stream. Second set, Maze. Well, where are we now? What would I need? Do I see that being the case? The next 5 years, I don't think so. I think it's possible. I think it's possible, second set, for me to get there, but I don't see it in my current time horizon. I usually think in terms of like 5, 10 years. Once you start getting past 5 years, it starts to get very blurry. Like in the next 5 years, I could probably see rationally, bear in mind these are rational numbers. It's like Dan Tapiero with his 10T. He sees the crypto markets at 10T and he says that's very reserved. So it's wonderful listening to him. I see at least at least a 10x in the portfolio, and that's the rational number. I don't see why, because these markets get extremely irrational. I don't see why I don't see why I wouldn't experience maybe 20, 25x within the next 5 years. I think those are reasonable. Note that there's a difference between rational and reasonable. So my rational target or expectation is quite comforting. 10x from a traditional finance perspective is rare on a portfolio. Get it on a position, but you can't. Portfolio isn't a position; it's a composition of positions, and any position should be properly sized. 2, 3, 4, 5, 10%. And when what Buffett says and Munger, when you have and what Druckenmiller says, well, what does he say? He says when there's a pitch. That's what Druckenmiller said. When there's a pitch, and Buffett says, well, concentration. So I have my concentrated position, and it just so happens that concentrated position has very rational arguments why it will exist in 5 years. So guess what? The fun, exciting thing that gives me that the butterflies is the shit that I chose is going to be here in 5 years, continuing to do what it currently does. And it will experience whatever liquidity conditions exist in 5 years. And it has the largest TVL in all of DeFi. It's the leader of TVL on DeFi. It's going to do well over the next 5 years. DeFi, thank you very much. Whether it's a pro or not, I have developed a narrative, a story. I've developed rules of how to execute. I've determined a way to engage with markets that are sustainable and comforting and exciting. I see volatility approaching, and if it doesn't, and if it's cut short because of intervention, it leads to the same exact path either way. Sure, doom and gloom, the banks are going to collapse. Commercial real estate is going to collapse. It leads to the same destination of the world seeking out the most frictionless way to acquire currency units. And that's here. Period. Chris just picked up some 4-year vote lock Pepe. Where are my bribes? One Pepe. Oh dear. Uh, Listen, some people are going to make a lot of money, and the majority are not. Think about all the people that bought Dogecoin that night of Saturday Night Live when Musk went on Saturday Night Live. Think of all those people. And me, as a parent, I feel bad because at least I wish they heard my arguments of PvP. Assess your peers, the vested interest, who you're engaging with. Look at the contract, see who the holders are, look at their on-chain activity. When are they going to sell? Because when they sell, Saturday Night Live happens, and that asset just goes bye-bye with regard to price, and there goes your paper gains. So, you know, I wish at least they had that that little bit of ability or encouragement to be a little quantitative about their engagement with a completely irrational asset. I meant today, by the time I started seeing the stream, yeah, yes, indeedy, my friend. Um, uh, what's the portfolio look like these days, Cap? I took, towards the end of 22, I took my aura position. I have done nothing this year. I look for towards the end of 22. I took an early position in tapioca, a little seed round, small. So I look forward to that position realizing, becoming real, and the protocol launching. I've taken no positions this year. I played around with LP positions. During Arbitrum launch, Arb token, I played around on Arbitrum with Joe. Joe's lovely. Joe's a wonderful AMM on Arbitrum and Avalanche. Did I do anything interesting? I played around with it. I probably made money rather than lost. I think I made a couple $100 at the end of the day. I don't think I lost any money. That's about it. I haven't really been engaging. It's just we had tax season shortly ago, so I had to, we make money. We claiming every week. That's our income. We need this money. So obviously, a good part of my perspective nowadays is with the size of the portfolio that I have. So, we're not looking for those outsized returns. So a good part of my content is really geared to someone trying to get into the crypto space that has capital, like, a 40-year-old person that's been working for 20 years, a family man that has, like a two, $300,000 worth of savings, and they're like, all right, what do I do with 30 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand, or larger portfolios? I've had some folks when I was doing my one-on-ones a while back, and they were large portfolios. One guy with like 20 something mil. We were talking for a while. Very nice guy. I think he did better than worse. I would like to get those one-on-ones back up, but I don't think folks are keen on paying for financial advice nowadays, which is why I do my streams. These aren't paid at all. But when the liquidity returns and, you know, and more profits are around, I'm more than happy to continue providing that kind of engagement with folks. Perry, Sunday morning down here in Australia. Australia. Yeah. Jangles in the house, a pleasure. I wish I could get a little bit more, back to what Luke said, I wish I could get a little bit more granular, but I don't think that does anyone anything good. Folks on Discord pretty much know the structure of the portfolio after all these years. Um, But I don't think it does anyone good to just generally mention what I have, because in the end, a portfolio needs to be an expression of who you are and what you're comfortable with. And that means it needs to come from everyone individually. So my portfolio should not be what anyone else's portfolio looks like. Everyone needs to carve their own path because you need to sleep at night. Second set, you're very welcome. Thanks for the education and motivation to make moves that will put us at ease. Captain Comfort. You know, thank you. That is a good title. Perry, I'd like to think that we can all play a part in pushing the simple idea of rationally interacting with risk markets, even if it's just to a friend and family for now. You're very welcome. Try and help anyone that you can. Look, you, driving down the street and someone's asking for $20, or or there's a kid in the family trying to go to college, and you're like, you're giving them advice. The whole point maybe of this stream is just give rational advice. and don't be degenerate, and try and help people. Be kind. And the most important person to be kind to is yourself. And take care of yourself and take care of your families. 18 people remaining on this long stream on a Saturday night. 10 likes. Click that thumbs up button. Thank you very much. Saturday, May 6th at 9:36 p.m. Thank you everyone for joining. Tell everyone to subscribe that you think I may be able to help. More than happy to help anyone that I can. I wish you all a good evening and after party on Discord for the most rational community in the entire crypto space. Y'all have a good one now. See you next time. Peace.